what's kind of like the situation in New York nowadays, especially when it comes to like gyms or even jiu-jitsu gyms? Like, what's the pulse there now?
So I honestly, I missed the last Zoom meeting that Marcelo did. I was present for the first one, but that was during the time when everything was shut down anyway. So he sent out an email essentially saying that they do plan to reopen in some form, way, or shape in May, so May 15th. The vaccination has been pretty decent here, like vaccination rate and the general uptake. We get these cards. Actually, I have one right here. We get these like cards to say that you're vaccinated, you're freer to do things that you want to do, although you still want to mask on and stuff. So we're waiting to see what that's going to look like. A lot of the regular gyms are open and they have things like capacity restrictions. They try to not only limit the number of people, so you kind of pre-book your sessions, but you have to work out with your mask on. Like you don't take it off. You take every precaution. You try to sanitize your hands and all that kind of stuff. But it sounds like we'll have some form of training in May. Really, dude? Jesus. Yeah. He does not like our neighbors. It's only like one neighbor that he really doesn't like.
It's a big dog. We're leaving this in, by the way.
He's not even that big. Like that's the funny part. He sounds very intimidating. He's just really scared most of the time.
We're gonna get a dog. We're gonna get a dog at some point, and like it could be like the fluffiest thing ever because my wife, she has some allergies to dogs, so we're looking for something hypoallergenic. So imagine
there's no such thing.
There's no such thing.
There's no such thing.
Yeah,
but it's a myth. Sorry,
it's a myth.
It's a myth. Sorry to break it to you.
Sorry to break it to you. Well, I'm fine, but
most allergens are shed as dandruff, and it just depends on how much dandruff your dog sheds.
Some dogs shed more than others.
Yeah. But unless you are specifically allergic to like the undercoat for whatever reason, or some sort of specific protein that's very specific to a certain breed or maybe a group of breeds, it's very, very, very unlikely that any dog will be quote unquote hypoallergenic. So there have been studies. So
there's been studies. You do science.
I do science. Yes, I have known to have done science at various points in my life.
Okay. So speaking of that, so are you fully vaccinated now?
I am. Yeah, I have been since February. By the luck of the draw and just how things have happened, I got lucky enough that my employer ordered quite a bit of doses. And I was able to get it very, very early. So my second dose came in, I think, first week of February. I've been fully vaccinated since then. But, my wife hasn't been. She just got her first a week ago or so. So I was still very careful. Like I wasn't trying to just go out, party all of a sudden. Although there are people outside now that you'll see just full on in party mode. As if nothing's going on.
Just YOLOing, as the kids say.
You could call it YOLOing.
YOLOing. And I thought they changed your DNA. I want to get a DNA transcriber to be 6'7", 350, just a ball of muscle. I don't even need jiu-jitsu technique at that point. When is that going to be available?
Not anytime soon. Although there are some technologies in early developmental stages that could probably do that.
Yeah, and in Marvel comic books, that would be called Super Soldier Surgeon.
We're about to get Spider-Man anytime now.
Ah, perfect. So we're rocking.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we're in fun times where we have to convince people to take vaccinations, which is quite interesting. But yeah, here we are.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess people have their reasons whether you agree with them or not. I've read some things where I'm like, I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I guess I'm all for choice, but at the same time, like if some of the reasons that are being given don't really make sense, then I don't know.
We all abide by certain rules, all of us. We don't get a choice.
We don't get a choice.
We don't. I mean, that's just the illusion, right? Even here, where it's like the gospel, it still is not true. There's certain things that you just don't get a choice. You pay your taxes, like that's it. You don't get a choice whether you want to do it or believe in it or not. I don't care how much of a libertarian you are. Same thing with vaccines, kind of, just in a different way.
I'll be getting mine eventually. It just might be like another year the way Ontario's going, because there seems to be a bit of a supply chain issue.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I hear that's been a real bottleneck there, and it's very unfortunate. I wish that it weren't the case, but it is. And here I honestly felt bad when I was getting my vaccine, and even though I went in at like 6 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday because that was an opening, and they gave me an opening, and they said, if you want yours, come in early on Saturday, we'll give it to you. I'm like, sure, no problem. So I did, and the nurse that was giving it to me, right, she asked me that very poignant question of, also, you work here, right? So do you see patients? And in my head, I'm like, no, I stare at the data on the computer screen. I feel so awful right now.
So selfish, taking it away from
very
somebody.
I felt extremely selfish. And mind you, it wasn't entirely selfish in that I am one link in the chain now that could be broken. So if I do get it, the chances are I don't spread it very far or at all.
Or it's the difference between like you being sick for like 2 weeks,
right,
off and on, and like, or you just wake up one day and you have the sniffles for a day or two, and then you're good.
Exactly, and you never know. It's one of those things that I mean I understand the whole concept of not living in fear of it, given the percentages when it comes to complications. But at the same time, I have a friend here who is anesthesiology resident. So he's been performing his fair share of intubations of COVID patients, and he once sent a text. This was a few weeks back, and he said, I'm right now sitting with a guy who I cannot extubate because he had COVID and his lungs are shot, and he was otherwise like mid-40s, perfectly healthy. And we don't know why, but that's just the reality. Like, this guy is not coming off of the ventilator, and it's kind of over. So I don't really know what to do, and tell us that. So just because you don't have comorbidities, stuff like that, there's still, yes, it's a small chance, but there's still a chance that something may happen. So being careful is more of a courtesy than anything at this point for me. Again, I could get it. I know that I'm very, very, very unlikely to have complications given my vaccination, but the last thing I want is to pass it on. Like, that's just my feeling about it. I would feel awful if I knew that my carelessness or some sort of not respecting others in some way resulted in completely unnecessary death. Like, it just would feel awful.
Yeah, well, my wife's uncle is also an anesthesiologist, so he's been working in the epic center of Florida, as Aaron's been saying. So he's been working with several Florida mans down in Florida, but he's been saying the same stories of, like, people coming in, no core mobility, just somebody who's just overall healthy, mid-40s, maybe early 50s, and then they're just completely shot. He's the one who's basically like putting them on a ventilator, and basically, as you said, he's the one who's pretty much setting them up for, well, certain death, I guess you can say.
Yeah, in some way. Yeah.
So
it has not been a fun
kind of
year and a half. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just agreed. Hasn't been fun.
Okay. So, like, kind of in your opinion, especially like being in New York where things have been shut down, obviously you have a vaccination program that's running rapidly compared to something that's not running here at all. But at one point there was no vaccines going out, so you guys were all locked down like everybody else, right? Do you kind of agree that, or disagree, is that kind of the mentality you have to take and kind of lock people and limit mobility in order to control spread? Or is it, and obviously there's the repercussions of that are businesses being shut down, people not being able to make an income. Obviously, the government has some role in control, and I think they have to have some form of responsibility to assist individuals who need assistance based on employment or whatever because they can't make an income. Or is it just open it up and just, it's kind of like fittest of survival lives, right? So
basically what Aaron is saying, lockdown, yes or no, or freedom guns, America, Florida.
So lockdown and assistance. Hold on, I'll just speak to both. So as far as lockdowns go, so New York, as you said, was the epicenter
Epic epicenter
of the pandemic. So I started working from home in March last year. Luckily, I have a wife who is educated and informed enough to basically say, hey, get your butt home and you're staying home. I don't care what you have to do. Make it happen. So I ended up, getting my monitor from work. I dragged it over. So I have a second monitor and I started working from home right away. And then the lockdown order came. At the time when it happened, New York was hitting something like 800 deaths a day. So this is the city, not the state. So the state,
just New York City, you're talking
New York
about.
City was 800 deaths a day. And at the time, we didn't quite know yet how to deal with the virus. Like there's been some improvements on managing it better. So the death rate is much, much lower now, even though the case rate is about the same. So the number of cases in New York in January and February, I think, was about the same as at the peak back in last March, April. But I think the death rate is like 1/10. So it's definitely better. And then you can look at the curves, like all this data is public. You can go on the New York City website. They publish all the numbers and you can see the lockdown measure happened like late April, I believe. And all the curves just went down to a halt. I think July, we had some days with 0 deaths. There were still cases, of course, hundreds, but 0 deaths for a number of days. So do lockdowns work? I mean, yes. You can look at New Zealand, you can look at Australia. They squashed their waves pretty quickly by just locking things down. But the other side of it is that, the concept of giving assistance to those who need it, primarily financial assistance, and it can come in many forms. I'm not a policy expert, right? I don't know what works best. And actually, I know I spoke to Mike about this, but the same thing has been said by Marcelo, right? When he had his Zoom meeting, Marcelo said, I'm not a policy expert. I don't want to talk about whether lockdowns are correct or not correct and how they're being implemented, but let's just figure out how to survive this. And that's the part of the equation that seems to be missing, at least in Ontario. It's the assistance, is to try to avoid unnecessary business closures. And I can tell you, New York, it's been awful. The number of storefronts, the number of vacant rentals is through the roof and has been for a while. Some of our favorite places to, get takeout from, like the first restaurant we visited when we came here for my job interview is now closed. And then that was kind of like a special little place that, that you would remember, Cambodian cuisine place like a block away. And now it's closed. There's a bunch of things that are closed. We see the for rent, for sale, for whatever signs everywhere. But at the same time, we had one of our staff members in our building that died from COVID. So, how do you balance that? That's somebody's dad. And he was like, I think he was like mid-50s. He wasn't even that old. He really wasn't.
Yeah,
so
I think
it's all a balance. It really is. But doing nothing is probably the worst thing you can do. And that's what I'm afraid of is a government that's ineffectual, that doesn't do anything.